about all the raw materials that go into your clothing. Think of about our dependence on fuels, energy in our economy today. How much we need fuels that don't pollute. Think about all the CO2 in the air, that there just aren't enough trees in the world to process or suck up. We know trees absorb carbon dioxide. Today, we're going to talk to a woman who is the chief science officer at a company that says they are converting captured CO2, taken out of the air, into materials that can make those fibers in our clothes and into renewable energy fuels. And I just think this is so cool that I wanted to explore them with you. So put on your earbuds or turn up the volume, grab a pen and paper or tablet to take notes, and let's get started. Welcome to Electric Ladies Podcast. We share stories, insights, tips, and advice from remarkably innovative women working on the front lines of corporate responsibility, energy, sustainability, and ESG-related issues. I'm your host, Joan Michelson. We talk about innovation, leadership, technologies, and careers, always bringing a new perspective. Find us anywhere you like to listen to podcasts on our website, electricladiespodcast.com, and through my Forbes articles as well. And please pass it on to your friends if you're so inclined and leave us a 5-star review. It helps other people find us. This episode is brought to you by Competent Boards, a comprehensive training program for board members and aspiring board members. I am faculty there myself, full disclosure, and have the Sustainability and ESG designation certification. It gives you the skills, strategic perspective, and confidence, importantly, needed for today's boardrooms, especially around the kinds of issues we talk about on Electric Ladies Podcast. It's great networking too, by the way. And you can check it out at competentboards.com. And please come join us in Dallas on April 22nd, 2025. If you're in Dallas or anywhere in Texas or anywhere else, please come join us at the Earth Day Women's Summit. It's part of the renowned and huge EarthX 2025 event, and we have an amazing all-star lineup. We're focused on highlighting the unique solutions and perspectives that women bring to this issue. Gee, guess why? Aligned with Electric Ladies, right? And we'll have a hands-on working session on solutions to the climate crisis and a few little bells and whistles. So ping me about it on LinkedIn or go to electricladiespodcast.com, put Summit in the search bar, and you will find all kinds of information. One more thing before we get started. If you are at an inflection point yourself looking for support with your ESG work or your career, please reach out to me. In all the chaos swirling around us, there are a lot of opportunities as well, and we don't want you to be flailing. Please reach out to me on Twitter at Joan Michelson or on LinkedIn and let me know. We can help you no matter what industry you're in. The clothing industry is the second largest emitter of carbon dioxide, CO2, according to the UN. Kind of staggering when you think about it. All those clothes in your closet and in stores, it's a huge percentage of landfills, hundreds of thousands of microfibers and microplastics polluting our waters, and frankly, being eaten by the fish we eat, too. I've seen a bunch of stories about the quantity of that. It's pretty scary. On Electric Ladies Podcast, we also talk about sustainable fashion a lot, and I speak about it too because it's such a critical problem. And frankly, it's something we can kind of control by what we buy, right? Sustainable aviation fuel has been another very tough challenge for decades. Speaking of fuels, I mentioned in the introduction, Richard Branson's Virgin Atlantic, I think started tackling this about 30 years ago, I recall. The science of it is so complicated if you just even think about it. So the company we're going to talk to today says they are having success tackling both of these enormous challenges by converting captured CO2, which just blows my mind. So let's ask her. I'd like you to meet Zara Summers, Chief Science Officer of LanzaTech. Briefly stated for now, and we'll let her explain it more in a minute. LanzaTech, as I said in the intro, is converting captured CO2 into the raw materials and energy we need for our lives. Dr. Zara previously worked at ExxonMobil for about 10 years in various scientific and leadership positions, focusing on developing biological solutions for navigating the energy transition, and including how, this is kind of interesting to me, how CO2, when it's buried underground, that is sequestered, how it affects what's next to it, right? How it affects microorganisms in the ground, et cetera. She also served as a science advisor to the Nature Conservancy. She's earned her bachelor's degree in biology at Cal State Northridge and her PhD in microbiology from the University of Massachusetts, completed her postdoc work at the University of Minnesota. And one fun thing that I want to find out how it's influenced her is she spent a year at Aix-Marseille University studying French language and literature. Okay, this is cool. This is called Renaissance Woman. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Zara Summers to Electric Ladies podcast. Welcome, Zara, and thank you for joining me.
Thanks so much, Joan. I'm really happy to be here with you. I'm laughing because of the comment about my year spent in France, which is one of the best years of my life.
I bet. So does that, I was fluent in French myself a long time ago, and I was going to spend a junior year abroad there as well at Université de Pauvre-Territoire, Montpellier. So has it influenced your scientific thinking now that we talk about it?
I think it gave an appreciation for, thinking outside the box and bringing creativity to the table. You meet a lot of different people when you go into different fields, but even studying at an international university and meeting folks from all over the world there. And the only way to communicate is through a language you're learning. So a lot of challenges you don't face day to day, but it teaches you how to think on your feet and communicate, which I think is one of the greatest skills if you're in science today, because collaboration gets you farther. So communication is key.
Absolutely. So tell us exactly what LanzaTech does and correct anything that I might have gotten wrong in the intro.
So LanzaTech is a company where we harness the power of the mighty microbe. So we have a industrial process that has 6 commercial plants operating around the world today. We have massive refinery scale size bioreactors, so big tubes filled with billions and trillions of bacteria. And what they're doing is they're eating gas. So they're eating CO2, carbon monoxide, and hydrogen, and they're turning that into ethanol. So these microbes are really interesting because they actually, the way that they take just gas and build all of what they need to be as cells, but also products that we can collect. This is the oldest metabolism on Earth. So imagine the ancestors that were like these microbes were the first life forms on Earth before the oxygenation of our atmosphere, before photosynthesis, before anything. They lived on our planet. After we stopped getting hit with asteroids, the planet cooled enough to have liquid water. That liquid water had a bunch of what we call reduced gases. So your carbon monoxide, your carbon dioxide, and your hydrogen and methane. And so these bacteria essentially have the same metabolism as like the first life on Earth. And so it makes them incredibly robust, incredibly able to take a beating. And so what we do is we take our giant bioreactors and we hook them on the back end of an industrial site. So what goes out a smokestack, if you think factory, you probably think of a big smokestack pointing up to the sky with billowing clouds of who knows what gases coming out. Well, what we've done is we've worked with partners like AcelorMittal or others that run steel mills. We've worked with oil and gas refineries and taking those emissions that would have been destined for the atmosphere, and we pipe them into our bioreactor, and our magnificent microbes take that gas and they turn it into ethanol. And when we pull out that ethanol, we can send it a lot of different places. We can send our ethanol to monoethylene glycol, which is a major component of polyester. So we have leggings with Athleta, we have running clothes with On Running, we have shoes, we have all sorts of things out there with different brands that you can buy today. So you can go to On Running, you can go to Adidas, you can go to Athleta and buy clothes made by these mighty microbes from steel mill emissions. Or we can take that, and with our partner company, LanzaJet, we can take that ethanol, we can do a few chemical steps and turn that into sustainable aviation fuel. And so you mentioned Virgin Atlantic. We actually flew a flight from Orlando to London with 50% of the fuel in that plane made from our ethanol. And so we really do span a lot of the consumer market. We also sell into, for example, the marine shipping fuel market, or simple what's in your cars today. There is some level of ethanol blending. It says it on the gas pump. And so we can also use our ethanol in regular car gasoline.
Fascinating. 800,000 questions. So just to be clear, your flight with the sustainable aviation fuel, was that with Virgin Atlantic?
That's right.
Oh, that's
and
great.
Sir, what's his name? So the flight that we flew from Orlando to London did have Sir Richard Branson himself on the flight. And it was a commercial flight with passengers on it as well. And so they were all told that there's a new jet fuel going to be on the plane. And they had the opportunity to rebook a different flight. Everybody except for 3 people stayed on the plane, and they all got commemorative luggage tags of the first ever sustainable aviation fuel from recycled carbon emissions. So it was pretty fun.
Oh, I would love that. I wish I was there. I would have done the same thing and
Yeah.
kind of done a dance. I met him a couple times at some events. He's a great character. So, when you, how can I put this? Talk about when you turn captured CO2 into these things. How does it actually show up in our lives? You mentioned kind of a little bit of it becoming, some of it goes polyester, some of it goes to sustainable aviation fuel. But do you then sell it to, like, I do a lot on sustainable fashion, as you heard me say. So are you giving it to like Lensig for their Tencel fabric to make something? So are you giving it to the fabric, the textile manufacturers, or are you giving it to the designer, the manufacturer? Where does it fit in, and what do they have to adjust, if anything, in their manufacturing process to accommodate this new thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we incorporate our raw materials into a new supply chain, so fashion is a great example. So we will be at an industrial site. So we're taking steel mill gas, we're taking oil and gas refinery off gas. We push it through our process and have ethanol at the end. We actually had to create an entire supply chain to get our ethanol to, like, let's say Athleta. And so how that works is our ethanol we then turn into monoethylene glycol, which would be identical to that monoethylene glycol you could get from fossil petroleum refining. And so once you're at that stage, then you work with the fabric or the textile makers, which then sell to the designers. So we're fully integrated across the supply chain. And what's important to us is we don't just leave it at monoethylene glycol. We take it through the fiber creation, because what we want to do is our end customer, like our On or our Athleta, we want to certify to them how much carbon savings they're actually realizing in that end piece of material. And so it's important for us to touch every piece of that supply chain to make sure that the carbon accounting is done well. So at the end, even though it may pass through many, many hands, we kind of have eyes on it the whole time to certify that that material is 50%, 70% less carbon than polyester made with fossil monoethylene glycol. And so that's a commitment we've made from the beginning to our end users to make sure that they realize the full value in their ESG goals.
Sure, I love that. So can you make plastic bags out of this stuff too then? Because that's
You
made from
can.
polyethylene too, isn't it?
Yeah, you can. So you could imagine a world where anything that starts as an ethylene molecule is 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 reachable. That's
Hmm.
right.
Wow.
We we've also made like EVA foam. So we haven't just made the polyester tops of running shoes. We've You can take the our products and turn it into the foam of shoes. We did that with On, a proof of concept to make the ethyl vinyl acetate. Um, We've also done surfactants, so like cleaning products at home, detergents, things like that. These are all fossil derived today. And I think what's interesting is a lot of people don't realize how many parts of a petroleum barrel touches their lives, right? It is everywhere. And so our one of our missions is to not only capture emissions, but to displace a lot of these fossil products because you don't have to participate continuously extracting the participation in extracting resources from the ground is not necessary when you take the approach of what can I do with carbon already above ground, and that's where that carbon recycling, that circular economy comes in. Another interesting thing from a clothing or fashion industry perspective is when you work with higher end brands, what's really exciting is they're thinking about the circular economy. So imagine you have a pair of, we've worked with Lululemon. Imagine you have a pair of Lululemon leggings you love, but after some point they're just kind of wearing out. There is a world where you can take clothing, especially polyester-based clothing, chop it up into little pieces, and then push it through what we call a gasifier. So this is something that instead of incinerating it to just CO2, it makes synthesis gas, which is hydrogen, carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide, exactly what our bacteria love to eat. And so then you can imagine a world where you have this circular economy where people are bringing back used clothes. People are signing up for running shoe subscriptions where you turn a pair in, you get a new pair. And this is where the mindset of these brands are going because they do see a way to now close that loop, to actually take old and make new from it, not just from a mechanical recycling, but taking it all the way back to the gases. And that's what we're enabling. Because before, you could take plastic bottles and then it would kind of get downgraded to a park bench, right? But you could never, it's harder to make on like equivalent quality with mechanical recycling. And so what we're enabling is that full circular economy where you get like from like, because we're taking it back to the elemental kind of gas level.
I love that. And the company can get the used shoes back so they don't end up in the landfill, right?
That's right.
So if they don't get them back, are the products made with your stuff more biodegradable?
So it depends on the molecular structure of the molecules. What we're doing is providing the base materials. But there are paths to actually create more biodegradable polymers using biology. And so we're well poised and have some unannounced projects with folks that are looking into more biodegradable. So using industrial emissions to then produce biodegradable products, like purely like compostable, biodegradable products to displace plastic altogether. But you will always likely have some level of need for these, what was thought to be purely hydrocarbon or petroleum products. And so what we're trying to do is minimize where you can and then displace. Use that carbon more than once. Don't just pull it out of the ground, use it once and release it.
Right, exactly. So what's another interesting point about all this is the big argument from the fossil fuel companies about against a lot of the provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act and et cetera, what I call the trifecta, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Bill, and the Chips and Science Act, is that people don't, what you said, the people don't realize how many ways petroleum shows up in our world. And what you're saying is, well, not for long. You
That's
know,
right.
there's another way. Well, it's chemistry, right?
It's
It's
chemistry, right?
chemistry.
And
Yeah.
when you take it back to a molecular um, baseline, biology, petroleum today is just cooked up algae and trees, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
biology it's the original biofuel. It's just a couple million years in the making.
Well, the other interesting thing, I mean, there's so many I could go on about this forever, but the another interesting side effect would be like there's places in Oklahoma and around there that have been having earthquakes that never did before because of the shale drilling, et cetera. And if they can get the same byproduct, I mean, even let the oil and gas companies make it. We don't care who makes
Yeah.
it, right? That they can, without upsetting the earth and draining natural resources, then that saves that disruption also, right? So are these products labeled in some way? I mean, does it say like if I go to Lululemon, which I never have, by the way, full disclosure, but if I did and went to look, for a pair of leggings or whatever, does it say this pair was made with sustainable polyester or what does it say?
So a lot of the brands will feature it in the tag, like on the hang tag of the clothes. Some have gone so far to include it on the item itself. So we have a pair of trail running shoes that we made with REI, where on the sole of the shoes it says this, like the polyester upper was made with recycled carbon, which were steel emissions captured by LanzaTech. Um, and so brands are really proud of it. Brands are Craig Hoppers, which is a European based like outdoor, like they make a lot of fleeces and things like that. They have a whole line called CO2 Renew, which is our recycled carbon is their one of their major components of the polyester fleece. And so it says there's a tag sewn on the jacket that says this is made with recycled CO2 from emissions, keeping CO2 out of the atmosphere. So people are responding really well. They've done multiple lines of jackets now because they're seeing the customers being quite excited. And with clothing, as you know, that there's a markup already in these brands, and so they're able to offer things at the same price that they were
I
before.
was going to ask you that. It doesn't
Um,
change the pricing.
not
They're
not
already,
not for
you
not for
already have the
something.
brand markup. Yeah.
Yeah. So the pricing really kind of stays on par with fossil.
Right. Right. Great. So, by the way, I mean, I was just in Barcelona. It's too bad I didn't know I would have looked. My colleague Janissa that works with me is based in Berlin, so I'll see if she can find some labels and take a picture for me. Um, Talk about, I'm fascinated by sustainable aviation fuel. It's been such a bloody tough nut to crack. And I mean, I travel a lot. I'm doing this summit, which we can talk about after this as well offline. But there are people who I'm finding now, both for our summit and in other events, I'm actually hearing people say, I'm not going to travel because I don't want to add to my carbon footprint. I'm trying to reduce my carbon footprint, especially people from the other side of the pond, if you will. So if we can use sustainable aviation, 50% is extraordinary. I mean, I didn't know, I always thought it was going to be like 1% or maybe 10 if we're lucky, but 50% is amazing. So if we can get to that level, then that addresses a huge point of emissions, right? So how are you how does that work and how like talk a little bit more about sustainable aviation fuel? You said it converts um the same similar kind of compound, but then how much would it does it always reduce it 50% or would does it can you use it like I have a hybrid vehicle. I couldn't get an EV because my building doesn't have charging. So and I wasn't going to chase charging stations for the rest of my life. So could I put it in my car, for example?
So the way that the sustainable aviation fuel works is it's a really long chain molecules. Uh, when when petrochemical refining produces aviation fuel, what we call Jet A, that's like the standard jet fuel that would go into your commercial airliners. There are those long chain molecules that combust and have a high energy so the planes can fly long distances. There's also aromatic rings that come along because the petroleum isn't pure, right? Petroleum is one of the most complex mixtures on the planet. And as you move through the refining process, it's very hard to get pure single molecule mixes. And so these aromatics interact with the seals and the gaskets, and they swell. And so if you take a commercial airplane today, and you put our jet fuel in it, we don't have any of the aromatics because we make pure molecules that we make the pure kind of jet molecules. And so the reason why we're limited to a 50-50 blend is so that we don't disrupt the seals that have already touched jet A. And so that's kind of where our limit of 50-50 blend is. If you, in theory, if you wanted to experiment with aviation, which most people don't,
No,
you
that's
could
not, yeah.
you could make a brand new plane that never sees Jet A and puts sustainable aviation fuel in that has no aromatics, and you would probably not have any of these issues. But you would have to keep it. The problem is the supply of sustainable aviation fuel is so low. And the way that the planes fuel, this is something I learned when I started working in this field that I didn't, you don't think about these things. But when you go to an airport, there's just a big pool of jet fuel under the airport and all the planes pull from it, right? Or they truck it around and pull from it, right? It's a shared pool. And so when one company has a SAF, like we're going to fly on X amount, they kind of have to like work with the pool or truck it in separate. And so you're never going to actually get 50% until you have massive supplies because you're going after such large volumes that you're dumping into. And so for us, like we need to build more plants, number one. So our first SAF plant, the LanzaJet Freedom Pines Fuels plant. So LanzaJet is building this. It's a 10 million gallon per year plant located outside of Savannah, Georgia, down south. And that, when it's done, will be one of the largest SAF facility on Earth. But we need to somehow find, the U.S. has under the Biden administration, had a goal of 3 billion gallons of SAF per year. And so we have a 10 million gallon sustainable aviation fuel plant with LanzaJet. So we need to, there's a lot more plants to build. But it does look different than what I call MoGas or gasoline that goes in your car. That doesn't have to be as powerful because you're not running as large of turbines as jets. So jet is a very special mix.
Does it change? Well, there are planes being built every day, right? Just, see what Boeing's been going through, right? And Airbus picking up some of the slack and others. Does it change how the airplane itself is manufactured and I can almost see, some of the plastics that go into the airplane itself being using your other product.
Yeah.
But does the sustainable aviation fuel change the way the engine is constructed or any of the fuel lines or anything like that? No, she's shaking her head no. You can't see it if you're listening, but she's shaking her head no.
No. And like a lot of what we've done as a company is really focused on minimal disruption. So what can we replace that you don't even notice? Because I think when you're kind of when you're swimming upstream or when you're rolling the boulder up the hill, you want as little resistance as possible, because it turns out people, if they have to make so many changes in their daily routine, they're going to start to say, oh, I don't want it. If it's going to cost more and I have to change how I do everything and this and that, it's just really hard to break into. Like, people like ease. No one looks to make their day more complicated.
Yeah, well, it's also market adoption, right? I mean,
Yeah,
the company you're just creating the raw materials. The manufacturers who have to use what you make don't want to have to completely redo their entire manufacturing system. I mean, just as a kind of interesting analogy, I worked at 60 Minutes and I did a story on the hazards of monosodium glutamate, especially for children, and how it changes your brain. It works on your body. It doesn't actually work on food. And we focused it on kids who had been diagnosed with ADHD when they just had too much crap in their diet, to put it bluntly, and particularly MSG. And people would say to me, "Oh, but they're not going to change their whole food, their whole manufacturing system." Well, actually, they did, right? And now it's labeled more, and people
Yeah.
say no MSG on food products, things like that. So it's possible, but it's a lot of work. So I'm another product that I've seen that you guys are working on, and then I'll want to ask you a couple other things and then get some career advice from you for everybody. But another product I've heard you are working on is new forms of protein that can actually help both from the agricultural side address the ravages of climate change on the food supply, um, and also provide more nutrient-rich foods to people who are food insecure. I mean, I'm not an anti-GMO person. I believe that if you can give people rice that has more protein in it and save more lives, that's a good thing. So I'm really curious about that. Is it like another version of Beyond Meat or Impossible Burger or something? Or kind of tell us a little bit about what the protein is.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you brought that up because it is such an exciting thing to think about. I don't know how many people realize this, but we're rapidly approaching 10 billion human beings living at the same time on Earth. And unfortunately, our agricultural systems are either staying the same or in some countries getting less effective. And
And
the
it
amount of
wasn't built for that
chemicals,
many people. Yeah, and it wasn't
yeah,
built for that many people in the first place. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no. And then what we've done to our soils, we've turned it into dirt, right? When you're depleting an environment in that way, you're now having to add excess of chemicals in order to make the plants be able to survive in the dirt. What was once rich soil is now suffering from water runoff and massive fertilizer additions. So while some people say protein, that's completely different from jet fuel. I think it is honestly a natural extension of what we're already doing. And because when we have that big bioreactor, that like essentially a brewery slapped on the back end of a steel mill, we're making ethanol. So of all the carbon that goes in, you could really simple back of envelope math, 95% of that carbon is going to end up in that ethanol. Like, great, we'll sell that. We'll make fuel, we'll make clothes, we'll make a lot of things out of that. But that 5% is actually the bacteria themselves because they're continuously growing and replicating. They're happy, they're eating their gas, they're making ethanol, but every once in a while, they divide. Like one cell goes to two. And those cells at the end of the day they're non-GMO. And they're really, really high in protein, but not just a few amino acids, all amino acids. And so
Wow.
what we're doing today at our commercial plants is we're taking those bacteria, we put them through, we deactivate them and we obliterate them into little peptides, and we make a protein powder that looks just like what you would put in your smoothie. And we're selling that into the aquaculture market today, meaning when people want to grow big fish, they actually go out and catch little fish, grind up those little fish, make pellets, and feed the big fish. Wouldn't it be great if we could displace some of those little fish or the soy protein they're adding with our bacteria? And the answer is yes, it is great. And it's actually really lowering the carbon intensity of aquaculture because we're not relying on soy, which then competes with human food on land. So we've been doing that for years. We've been doing that since about 2018, selling it our spent biomass into the aquaculture market. Think of it as like brewer's yeast, right? I mean, it's the yeast that after you make the beer and you do everything, you dry it and people eat it. My grandmother used to put it on popcorn. It used to drive me and my cousins nuts. It was healthier than butter.
So that reminds me of, what I'm hearing you say, if I'm hearing correctly, is that it's what you're doing is you're using a byproduct of the other processes to create yet another product. And because it happens to have extremely high nutritional value, as you discovered. And it's interesting because I was in Iceland, and there's some companies that are also doing captured CO2. I just aired an episode, for example, with Bjork Christian's daughter, who is the COO and CFO of Carbon Recycling International. You might know them. But
Mhm.
I also went to CarbFix and On Power have this great they have these great concepts of quote office parks, as I call them, in Iceland, where part of the criteria of being a member is you have to be able to you have to have a low carbon footprint yourself for your company, but then you have to be able to use some of the products or byproducts of the other tenants in the park, and they have to be able to use yours. So every park is a circular economy. And at CarbFix and On Power, there's a company that is making protein that they call that's like spirulina-ish from a byproduct of their process of one of the company's processes of capturing CO2 and making energy from it. And I have pictures of this big pink plants and stuff with the radio, the lighting and stuff. It's really fascinating stuff. So it kind of reminds me of that a little bit. But is that right? So it's like finding another, I mean, this is the ultimate circular economy, right? It's finding another use for the byproduct, right?
That's right. And I think since we've been doing that since 2018, what's happened internally is we've been saying, what if in one of our reactors we made just protein and so 100% of the carbon went to nutrition. And so what we've done is we've scaled up that process as well. So it's not commercial. We don't have commercial plants operating now, but it is something we announced in October that we've done all the piloting and we've done all the testing. We're working with food formulators. We've taken 100% of the gas, turned it into biomass, and then taken that and we've made energy bars, ready mixed drink. We've made
Wow.
protein enriched breads, cheeses, sauces. Um, and that I think is just a different application. So imagine you're a country that has kind of run out of the agricultural space to feed your populace. There is a chance to put on one of our plants on the back end of your oil and gas refinery or your cement plant and actually turn those emissions into protein that can be mixed with other ingredients. And you asked earlier about like, is this another Beyond Burger or Impossible Burger? So we would be upstream of them. So those would be potential customers where we provide one of their many protein streams that they mix together to formulate that. So we are an ingredient, not a formulator. So we would then provide that to two different food formulators. So there's animal feed, there's pet feed, like dog and cat food that needs a high protein content. And then aquaculture, which is a massive growing market. Blue foods are probably going to help sustain our growing population, even more so in the future. By feeding these fish, not little fish that we're depleting from the oceans, we're preserving natural environments. Like conservation is a big piece of this, is how can you preserve natural spaces for what they're meant to be? And so we're really low impact, if not positive impact on biodiversity and land use as well, when you think about what you could do with this protein. So it's just really exciting to think about.
Yeah, it is. And I can also see how it can address some of the issues related to geopolitics, frankly, because in areas, countries that are war torn that can't get food in from other places because of the conflicts, if they can build your plant, somewhere, then they can feed themselves without having to worry about, and, obviously COVID with the supply chains really taught us about that. So I want to ask you something else and then get some career advice from you, but it's related to this. And I have 100 more questions about all this, but I'll spare you the moment. Um, it's clearly, as from what I saw, you guys have LanzaTech has gotten a lot of grants from the U.S. federal government, from the energy department from the Navy, for example, for your protein, which I thought was really an interesting application to help feed the sailors, out at sea, for example, it sounds like. So are your grants at risk now from the freeze and all the craziness going on down the block from me? I mean, I saw that there was a $200 million grant from the Energy Department for the Secure project. It captured CO2. That I don't imagine you got all your $200 million by the end of December. So what's the status of the impact on LanzaTech of the freeze, if anything, on from the federal grants and contracts, especially on this kind of stuff?
Yeah, no, I mean that's a great question. I think where our head is at is very much we offer domestic resiliency, we offer supply chain resiliency, we offer the ability to take something that once was a waste and create a value chain anywhere. And so what we're seeing, as long as we kind of wait and see what the government's going to prioritize, we feel like that is in line with it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you sit on. You want jobs and you want to make the most from what you have. And for a lot of countries, it's I want to be able to make everything I need within my borders just in case. And so we do offer a path to that. As far as some of our existing work with the Department of Energy, I mean the funds, if the funds are appropriated, it's usually going to be fine. And so a lot of our projects are continuing to be funded. I think what the biggest difference is now is waiting to see what happened with some of the calls that were put out. So calls for proposals, and just kind of see what the new agenda is going to look like. But because we offer such a versatile technology, we're hopeful that it doesn't matter what your politics are. If you want to make money and make the environment around you cleaner and it's the not in my backyard, but you want one of our plants in your backyard because we're taking emissions away from your neighborhood and turning it into something valuable, bringing biotech, to industrial sites. So we remain hopeful.
Well, I hope so, and I hope you still get your money because they're not even paying contracts
Yeah.
that have delivered. So power to you. We can talk about that for another 700 years, but I'll be hoping that you get it. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's a legal contract, and you'll keep your lawyers in business for a while on that one. But I hope you don't get too much pushback. So before I let you go, I like to get career advice for mid-career women. So think about a woman that has at least 10, maybe more years of experience. She knows what she's good at. She's got an education. She's got experience. She wants to advance. She wants to excel, and she wants to make money, and she wants to make a difference, and doesn't feel like she should have to trade those away, right? So, what advice would you give to her?
I mean, I made a pretty big career transition when I was in my late 30s, and for me, after 10 years at a big secure oil and gas company, moving to a small startup, I think I recognized that it's okay to be a little bit scared and kind of like embrace the uncertainty. Don't let that stop you from taking a chance. It's almost like I felt like it was the double Dutch jump rope, and you're watching and you're like, just jump in, just jump in. And my advice is just do it, because even if it crashes and burns, it's experience and you learn no matter up and down inside it. But if you keep doing the same thing you've always done, like you're robbing yourself of those opportunities. And I am lucky enough to have, my husband has a job, right? And so I had that kind of worst case scenario. It'll be okay. But and I recognize that not everyone has that, but even small risks, even putting your hand up for a project where you might know 20% of what it takes to do it, but gosh, isn't that the best way to motivate yourself to learn something new? So I am if you rank us in risk taking, I am on the higher end of risk taking, but I've never, yeah, I've never been
I'm a
disappointed
member
by
of that
that.
club. Yeah.
Yeah.
Never what?
And naming it sometimes helps, right? But before, like if you rationalize it with yourself and say, you're scared right now, but what is the honest, absolute worst thing that could happen? And when you really talk through it internally, you realize like, yeah, it doesn't go well, but look at all the experience I'm going to gain. Look at how I'll follow and understand. And if you look at it from that perspective, it becomes less scary, and then you can just jump in.
Yeah, and the people that you'll meet. I mean, my corollary was I spent many years in corporate America, Deloitte, America, and American Express, and went back and forth between corporate communications and journalism. And then about 17 years ago, I was recruited, what felt like from Mars, to head up communications and co-head the sales and marketing of the electric car division of Chrysler. I didn't own a car. I'd never worked in the car business. The words automotive and vehicle were not on my resume anywhere. If I had applied for X job, they would never know my name. But I happened to go to a meeting, which was a lunch, and I'm talking to people, and it was in this EV division. And I'm talking to people, and we went then afterwards, we sat around and went around the table. Turns out I was talking to the president of the division. I had no idea. And at the the next morning after that meeting, he called me and said, "Are you happy?" And started recruiting me and changed my life, got me into the green economy. I met all these cool people, and they moved me, brace yourself, from Washington, D.C. to Fargo, North Dakota. And my friends thought I needed a frontal lobotomy, that I'd completely flipped my lid. And I said, "Well, you said, I said, what's the worst that could happen? I
You
hate
can
it and I
always
leave,
move
right?"
back.
And I did it once before when I was living in New York City right after and 9/11 happened. I was in New York for 9/11 and I got offered a job in Las Vegas. Yes, I've lived in extreme hot and extreme cold. But it's like you know that you're going to survive whatever's going to happen one way or another. It might not be pretty, but you will. And look what happened. I mean, I ended up, changing my life forever. And we did hockey stick growth because my boss said to me, "You were so effective and are so effective because you bring new ideas because you had not worked in the industry before, right? It's like you worked in an ancillary industry in the oil and gas industry, but it's really different than, high tech microbes, right? I mean, you have a degree in biology, thank goodness. But so you have to do that. And you're robbing I love what you said. You're robbing yourself of the opportunity. And I would also say you're robbing yourself, if you don't do it, of the opportunity to discover new parts of yourself, to
That's right.
discover strengths and skills that you didn't know you had, to be curious and learn things that you didn't even know existed on the planet. That's what I love about what I do, is like talking to people like you. It's like, wow, this is like unbelievable. Who would think of this, right? And that's exciting, but you're not going to do that living in your safe little bubble and never
Yeah.
going outside, right?
Yeah. I
So,
mean, that's exactly right. And there's even things that you don't realize you're going to get to do in that first, right? I now have I have a team that is in India. I've gotten to understand that culture and dig in there, and it's just amazing. I have a team in China, same, amazing. Like I getting to have a global team that reports up through me where I get to understand what they care about, understand what motivates them. Just there's so many perks that I didn't even know would be so important to me now. I can't imagine having missed that opportunity. So just dive in is my advice.
absolutely. Well, as a friend of mine used to say, you never learn less.
Yeah, that's
Right?
right.
And Buckminster Fuller used to say, "You never learn less," right? They're not taking it away. So you're really terrific, Zara. I really appreciate it. Any final thoughts before I let you get back to changing the world?
No, I mean, as someone who's trying to change the world, if everyone would just take that 2-second pause and say, I'm holding something made of carbon, where did that carbon come from? I think the world would be a lot better place if everyone even started to think about it in that way. Where's my carbon coming from? So,
Oh, I love that. Now, where's my carbon coming from? I might call our episode that, right? Because people don't realize it.
No, it's like electricity comes from the wall, right?
Yeah, I know. It's yeah, right, exactly. Bingo. Yeah, it comes from the wall. Yeah, no. Can't believe that. I've got a bridge to sell you.
Right.
So, thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Zara Summers, Chief Science Officer at LanzaTech. Uh, so, what do you want to see companies label their products? I mean, if you see companies that literally have their products labeled sustainably, would you buy it? Are you going to like go look for, made with LanzaTech carbon in your new pants or captured CO2 for that matter? Does it change what you buy? Post it to us on Twitter and Threads at Joan Michelson. Send us any questions there as well. And you may win a complimentary 30-minute coaching session with me. I've met wonderful people this way. It's really fun. And please subscribe to our mailing list to stay abreast of our amazing, amazing, talented guests like Zara, our articles, and career advice. You can subscribe on electricladiespodcast.com. And do go to there for the summit as well. Just put in the word summit, it'll pop up. I'm Joan Michelson. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.